Okay guys, let's do a tappet adjusted on the Classic 350 Reborn. First start with a cold motor, so that's the most important thing there. After that, if you've got any fuel in the tank or it's half full, it may be a bit heavy, so drain your tank, because you'll be a lot happier later on when you're moving that around and you've got no worries about dropping it. Get your solo seat off, that's a fairly easy one there, and to do that you'll need 12mm Spanish dive 2, like an open ender on one end or a ratchet on the other, and 12mm will get you out of trouble there. So underneath your seat there you've got only one nut to get out, so undo that 12mm nut, pull the bolt straight through, lift the seat off. And while we're at it, look at this smart looking touring seat I've got on one of the bikes here with the optional spring kit. Now that looks the part too, so if you've got one of those, what you're going to have to do is run to a 10mm spanner to start off with. So you run the 10mm in here at the back part of the support there, get that nut out of the way, and then after that you go to your 12mm under the seat, and then rip the seat straight off. And once you rip that seat straight off, you'll be looking at something like just a bare bikey. But here's a little bit better look at the crossbolt. See, very similar to the other one, same thing. And now we've got the bike stripped down, seat off, and that's how it looks at this stage. Now we're going to go in and remove the rear part of the tank bolt, so you'll need an 8 and 10mm combo. There it is there, your 8mm on the right. We'll have that over again, your 8mm on the left and your 10s on the right. And the smart idea after that would be get a 3v2, lift the tank up, put it under it like that, and this is going to give you easy access to underneath the tank, which is really important, especially to get at this fuel line, because it's a tough little sucker to get at, and you've got to get up there into the front there, squeeze it and pull it down, or pull it back, then pull it down, and just clip it up against the fins there, and it'll just sit there. And more importantly, with your fuel pump there, what you have to be careful, don't break that plastic connector, it could cost you several $100s. Now once again, there's me line down there now next to the cylinder head, and believe me, it's a lot easier to do this tappet adjustment than what is making a clip. So then we get the 8-inch piece of 3v2 and bring the tank up and push it up higher, so now you've got plenty of room underneath, and you can see both vacuum hoses which go down the centre of the tank there they are. And then we head over to the fuel pump sort of power supply, and this is really a hard one to get at, so if you really, you really have to have good finger strength to put your hands in into there for a start to fit them and pull that plug out. And I reckon that's one of the worst things to do on this bike, because at times I've had it off a few times and I have trouble. Now back here, after that one you go into the both vents here, you pull them out of the way, and the first thing you'll notice, the one on the left has got a larger hole than the one on the right. And here's a better look here now, so when you're putting them back together, make sure they go on the right one. Smaller one to the right and the bigger hole there to the left, and you won't have any trouble in that area there. So let's go for the fun start now, and that'll be going into the motor side now. But before we do, how about if you find this helpful, or by the time you finish watching it you find it helpful, you might like to give it a thumbs up. That'd be appreciated and helps the channel a bit. And if you haven't thought about subscribing, there'll be a bit on this Classic 350 Reborn, plus the other one I should say, when I'm riding it around. So either one of them should sort of come up with something which appeals to you and well worth your trouble to come back and watch. So apart from that, we'll get back onto this, and this is what we're up to now on the right hand side of the motor. That gives you a good look what's going on. Now there's a bit of rubbish here with all these hoses going into it. See that little nut there in the centre? It's a 10mm, so all you've got to do is undo that one and remove it totally, and then slide her out. And here's a bit of a closer look at that nut, so you can see it and all the other tubing. Now there's a connector on the right hand side of it, so once you get to that stage, put your finger in it, just press it across, it comes off real easy, and there it is now done. So that's alright. Now back over to the right side of the motor, same side, this connector here, put your thumb at the bottom, press in, pull back, and there it is out now. Once again, job done, and you've removed that out of the way. In the centre you've got a coil bracket which has got 3 10mm bolts on it. So the top one is a little bit concealed, and the two on the left hand side, like from here, you can see it. You can see those quite easy, and you've got to sort of press in to get at that top one. But it can be done, it's not that hard to do. And here we are now with the 10mm ratchet for the top one, and getting that one out of the way. and when you do that and you remove the bottom ones, note that white top wire with the white marker on it, put it back in that same spot. I don't know for what reason. It might be beneficial, it might not. So once you do that, grab your bracket and pull it straight back out and hang it over the exhaust side, so it'll a little bit sort of touchy to pull out, but once you pull it, drop it down, pull it back, and then you end up with a mess like this. So everything's there hanging around. Best idea, get yourself a cable tie, 1 or 2, bundle them, put them up to the frame and zip tie them, and then after you zip tie, cut the excess off and most likely wear a pair of safety glasses so you've got no risk of being poked in the eye by one of these contraptions, because there you can see it there now. At the top there I've got my zip tie there which I haven't cut back, and that's the reason for the safety glasses. So swing around to the left hand side of the bike to remove the rocker cover. You've got 3 10mm captive bolts. So I undo them in a triangle pattern, so where I am now, to the back around to the front, and just gradually take them off. While I'm at it, I'll swing there and go to the toolkit and get my factory plug spinner out, and I'll pull the plug. Now guys, I did have plans of adding music to this clip, but I thought when you add music to any of the clips, there's always complaints from people who don't like the choice of music. So I decided on the off chance I might just do a voiceover, plus throw in the text, and if you don't want to listen to me, just turn the volume down and you can still read the text, and hopefully you'll still get a bit of good info out of this one, and we'll go on from now. So what we've done now, we've pulled the plug out. Now on the left hand side of the motor you've got 2 screws on the top part of the head. Don't touch these screws at all, and I'll explain what's going on there later. So leave these alone, stay right away from them, and we'll swing back around now to the right hand side of the motor. We'll just lift up the rocker cover, which we've done there now, a couple of inches. There you will see the seal there, what we're going to tease out of the slot in underneath, and you'll see it all the way around. So best idea, it's fairly easy to get out, just use your fingers, and after that pull the rocker cover out from the right hand side. So it comes out pretty easy now, you've already cleaned it up. Swing back around to the left of the thing and get onto your toe shifter, or in my case I've got a heel and toe. So there it is. Now grab hold of it and pull it up until you get into top gear. If you have any trouble getting it in top gear, just use a little bit of pressure on the shifter and then turn the back wheel a little bit anti-clockwise, and that'll do it. So we're chasing top dead centre of the timing chain now. So to get to that one, all you've got to do is swing to the back wheel, turn it anti-clockwise, or rotate it anti-clockwise, and look down at the timing chain now to look for the top dead centre indication hole. So it wasn't there before, but as it is, as I rotate it a bit further, right in the centre of the picture you'll see the hole there where it locks in with a special locking tool which you can buy. Now the tool itself is not required, and they're about $100 to buy from overseas or India, but don't waste your time, because if you sit it in this position and don't bub it, you are locked in at top dead centre. So once again, close look at the hole there, and that is indicating top dead centre, and that is the area where you're going to do all the work on this motor. So very easy to see there. Now once again, move the wheel around a little bit further, top dead centre goes out of play, and you've got to rotate it back around and pick her up again. Doesn't take long to find, and that's the easiest way to find it. Although you can, once you hit this spot, you can go around and just check in your spark plug hole, and it should, the piston should be up at the top too. Now we're getting to the valves, and here we're just sort of checking to see either valve wiggles, and they've got to wiggle so that you know they're closed in the position there where you need it. So now the closest valve to the motor, or closest to the fuel injector, is the inlet valve, and the gap size for that is 0.08. So once again, 0.08, intake valve closest to the fuel injector, and here's a close shot of the inlet valve, and once again 0.08. Now on the other side we've got the exhaust valve, and it's 0.18, and the exhaust valve naturally lives up to its name and lives closest to the exhaust side or to the front of the motor. So that solves the problem about where your intake valve is and where your exhaust, and here's a close look at the exhaust valve with a setting for 0.18. Now we go to the feeler gauges, Now I didn't actually have a 0.18, so I just made up with these two here to get the numbers, and that part there worked out pretty good for me. I was pretty happy with how that worked out. I did have a 0.18 but lost it, or should I say 0.008. Now we're in the intake side, so that one there I did have in stock, and I just put a 10 and 8 together, I think, on another one there and made it that way because that's the way it goes. So if you look at the inlet valve now, you've got the lockdown nut at the top, the adjuster screw in the centre of that, and your gap setting there on that plate there right at the bottom there. So that's a setup of the area you'll be working on, and these are all the tools you're required. Long nose pliers, a 10mm spanner, and there's sort of a little screwdriver there where you can get in there and do the adjustment, which I think is fairly essential. So once again now we're looking at the intake side and using the 10mm spanner. You just undo that nut and that'll be anti-clockwise. They're usually not on that tight anyway, so they're fairly easy to undo, so that doesn't take long at all. And then when I get to the stage where I undo the nut about a turn, I get there with that screw at the top and just screw it out. Probably, I don't know, one turn or something like that is good enough. Doesn't matter how far you turn it out because you're going to still have to turn it back in. So that side of it, you know, is only just sort of to give you a bit of free play. And then just give that tappet area there a bit of a wiggle. Make sure it's sort of a bit loose and all that where you can do it. And you can get in there and slide your feeler gauge in for the first time. And you'll be doing the inlet, so it'll be 0.08. And just make sure you got the right gauge, because now you're putting the wrong gauge in the wrong area and throw you out totally. So to do a recheck, we've got the flat blade driver, we've got the 10mm ringer open-ended spanner, feeler gauge is sitting in the gap position, and we're chasing 0.08. So there's a bit better look or closer look at what's going on of the items. Now slowly turn the screwdriver clockwise. So when you turn it clockwise, you're getting it to come down and bed or scratch on the feeler gauge. Once you hit that point where you turn it and it just sort of touches the feeler gauge, stop. So when you get to that one, slowly slide the gauge back and forth, or the feeler gauge there, so you're chasing a dragging, scratching feel or motion as you go across. And then once you've picked it up a couple of times, you won't have any problems. If you've got no resistance, you know you're too loose. If you get there and it jams, well, you know it's too tight. So practice. So here's another look, and there it is. The feeler gauge is bedded right down on it. And I think, as far as things go, the next step would be the hardest part to master. Takes a little bit of practice, and the only way you can get good at this really is practice. So we are up to this stage here now, and we're ready to do the adjustment. So we've got the 10mm open-ended on the lock nut. So there it is sitting there. We've got the screwdriver seated, and apply a bit of back pressure to the screwdriver, or anti-clockwise, while you turn the locking nut clockwise. So in other words, you've got to lock it in position that way, and you don't want the screw going back, or you don't want it going forward, making it too tight or too loose. So here's another look, not a real good shot, but it's a bit on the blurry side, and our target gap is 0.08mm because we're on the inlet. So what we're chasing again is a slightly scratchy, dragging feeling when you pull that feeler gauge back and forth across the area what we're working on. So there's no hurry to do it. Chase the drag, and it's sort of a hit or miss thing, and you just have to keep going until you get that sweet spot. So it's worth trying, and just persevere and get at it. So when satisfied and you hit it, or what you think's correct, nip it up, lock it in position, so by coming down on that lock nut there. And that part of the procedure's completed, and then you can swing over now to the exhaust side. So more importantly, be careful you don't bump that back wheel or throw your timing off. All the same tools are used on the exhaust valve, apart from the feeler gauge where you are going 0.18. So once again, loosen the nut off, back off the adjuster, slide in the feeler gauge, chase the 0.18 is your target, and once again when you get on this side you're virtually following the same system you followed on the first part of it, but the only thing is you're just using a different thickness in the feeler gauge. So more important, when you get your lock nut on, don't over tighten it. So then you return to the other side of the bike, and then you're going to rotate that back wheel anti-clockwise. And the reason you're doing that one, you're going to swing it around there and do 2 or 3 rotations, and then come back to top dead centre there, and then once again, see, we're back on top dead centre. I've rotated the wheel 2 or 3 times, and you're going to go back and check the work you've already done earlier on to see if you've got both your valves set and correct, because sometimes they can move, and sometimes you'll go back and you have a bit of trouble getting those feeler gauges in, and you reset it again and then try again. So that's what you're doing, making sure everything you do is correct, and we go from there. So here's a bit of very important information, what I think's worth thinking about or looking at. So, example, look at me Halcyon Blue bike. So here she is there now, not a bad looking bike either, I might say, because I'm really impressed with Enfields. They're my favourite bike. So we'll have a look at that rocker cover gasket, what we'd pulled down earlier on. So that's always one to look at. So, if you look at on my Halcyon Grey, I've pulled the rocker cover off this bike at least 6 times. Probably a good 6 times since I had it. And most have been just through experimental times, and the idea was to pull it off and just see what happens after I take it on and off, and compared to some of these ones on YouTube, it's say get rid of that gasket straight away. So I'm still on the original gasket. I've never replaced it or never had any issues with leaks or anything like that, and I've put 4,500 kilometres on this bike now, or probably close on 5. So 5,000 Ks, had it off 6 times, you could say, never had any oil leaks. So that's a pretty good record there. And once again, isn't this a good looking bike, this Halcyon Grey? So it really takes a nice profile. So I purchased a new gasket when I first started this work for $35 from the dealer. Never used it. If you're careful, I think, and get that gasket out and don't do anything silly, you can use that gasket quite a few times, and that means you're not out there spending money or the crap, because it costs you a lot more to do the job if you had to do that. So that's why the main reason I pulled it off and put it on about 6 times, just to see how many times you could do it, because I was a bit bored and had a bit of time on my hands, and that way I'd know if I got in here, I give you the correct information. That can be done several times. I've done it myself. I can guarantee you can do it more than once like you're going to do it, and you won't have any drama with it, providing you don't damage it and take your time. So here's my original factory gasket I bought for $35 from the dealer, and I would say if you can get out of it, don't bother spending or using it. So that'd be the best advice I could give you in that line. So after all, I've used my original now 6 times, still going strong, although the captive nut ones up the top there, the rubber gaskets, they're nearly buggered, the 3 of them. So give you an idea, I've had heaps of practice, like I said, around 6 times now, so I can go from the start, go into the tappet, adjust it there and do both tappets, swing back to the bike itself, put it all back together, and I'm getting used to it now, so I think I can knock it over roughly about 30 minutes from go to whoa. So it's a fairly quick exercise for me now to do it. So back to these tappets, and in this case I'm going to reuse the factory gasket there. So the main thing is with that, just check around that there's no residue on it, and that's the reason why you never do those couple of nuts on the left side of the motor to start with. So if you look at the top part of your rocker cover, see it there where the channel is, where the gasket fits in. What I do is get a bit of that Ultra Seal gasket goo, and I hit it on all 4 corners. So over to where the writing is there on the right hand side, I put some in there, some in the opposite side, and then go around it like that. Now here's how the factory gasket sits in here, like on the motor, and you'll see down the bottom part there, that's the part where you started off and put a bit of gasket cement, and I've got it listed there. It's number 1, midway on the right hand side 2, and over on 3. So after you've done that and put a little bit of gasket stuff on it, swing back around to your motor, slide it in position, the gasket, and this part here, just above the spark plug, that's where you first start off pressing it in position, and then you press fit it all the way around on both sides, running your finger around either side, and it'll just hold there in position, and you don't need any help. You can get in there, do this by yourself. Originally the first one I did, I got the wife to help me, but after that I thought I don't really need any help, and got into it like that. So once seated and you've got it in position, press down, and when it's in proper seated position, you'll notice the rocker cover will slip around on top just a few millimetres, and you'll know everything's bedded in flat. Then get there and tighten up your rocker cover in a triangle pattern. This screw where we've got the spanner in at the moment, you go from there over to the triangle side, over the other side, and then swing back and just keep working them down and bed them in place. And when you get to the captive nut where it jams in, stop. Now, one good point here worth mentioning is when you remove these 3 bolts to start off with before you start the exercise and go into the motor, that'd be the time to take note of how much tension was on those ones so you can repeat the effort when you come back into it and put it back on. That means so when you tighten those captive nuts down, you get to the point where you get resistance. When you get to that one, just give it a slight turn after that, just a fraction of a revolution, and you'll find that you don't have to tighten them much at all, and you don't have the risk of snapping them off and then cause some problems there, and you've got to use an easy out to get them back out. So that's my advice there. Take it easy with that one there when you get to the captive one. Now, one other thing while you've got the rocker cover back in position, and this may be worth going for because I do this too, I bring out a pencil type torch and I shine it right around where the rocker cover gasket beds in position, just to make sure, looking at it, it looks like it's all bedded in right for me. Now, doing that sort of bit of a tip, what I just mentioned to you there, long term has given me good results, and I haven't had any issues with that gasket, so keep that in mind too. Okay guys, we're on the final run now, and doesn't take long to put it all back together from here. So swing your coil pack to the underside of the framework there, and you've got 3 bolts that you're going to get into it and put that back together. So as far as that goes, that's a fairly easy task for you to do. Once you've got it in position, you've got your 2 wires there to go, plus your connector underneath, the wire up the top, make sure it's got the white tag on it. I don't know if it helps much, but put it back to where it was. Now on the left side of the motor, you've got this connector piece, what we originally pulled off with the 10mm nut. Put it back in position and connect and tighten the nut back on. Then you've got your connector plug to the right side of that one there, and just slip it in position, and everything's right then, and you've got everything under control underneath. You can fit your spark plug then, pull your lead down, connect that up. So apart from that, you can slide the tank back in position. At this stage you're sitting it up around that 8-inch mark, so you can get underneath there and grab these. And what I mean by these is these 2 vacuum hoses. So we've got 2 hoses there. If you've got your piece of 3x2 up 8 inches off it, you can get a clear run at this and get at these vacuum hoses. Then you've got to head into do the fuel connected plug. You can do that in, press it in, and you'll feel it click in position. So make sure it clicks. So that's important. Now when you get to that stage, you lower the tank down to the 3x2, just 2 inches off 2 to 3 inches off. Push your fuel supply in, and you'll hear it click in position. Then you drop it down and then secure the tank with the 8 and 10mm bolt you pulled out earlier. So you're down to that stage now, you've nearly got it under control. You can get there, fit your seat back on. You know the story there, just that long bolt. Or you can either go with this sort of fancy touring seat, whatever you like, and I really like that touring seat. So more importantly, then add some gas, so you could give it a half fill to see how things are going. And when you get to that stage, put the key in and recycle a motor 3 times without actually starting it. So once again, don't start it, because you'll hear it surge each time it does it, and then you can do a start up after that. So here we are with the start up. Okay guys, we're at the stage now where I'm about to kick the bike over, and what I can tell you now after summing up and putting this clip together is, if you follow these instructions on how to adjust the valves, you're going to find it a lot easier to do that, honestly, than compared to putting this presentation together and synchronising everything as best I could to make it sort of worth viewing. So I can guarantee if you follow these clips that step-by-step instructions, it'll be a lot easier for you to adjust these valves than what it was for me to make this clip, guaranteed, because it was a fair challenge to put this together for the amount of time. But more importantly, I'll head over to the bike now and I'll give her a kick over, and we'll just see if the effort was worth it, which I'm sure it will be. So we got power up there, just press the button. There she is, idling away, sounds good. Okay, we can turn that off now, so it's been a success that way. I'll go out and give her a test ride later. Best idea when you do this before we finish off is run the bike for a couple of minutes, then you get your torch out, run it around the rocket cover area to make sure that you've got no oil leaks, but give it a couple of minutes idle in there before you check that. Go out, give it a test run, come back, first thing you do from the test run, once again, check that you've got no oil leaks from that rocket cover. But apart from that, thanks for tuning in, take the look. Hope you thought this was worth your trouble to sit down and watch, and I think the ones that went through the whole lot and watch it from start to finish will be the ones that want to learn something from this one and save yourself a bit of money long term rather than get a dealer to do it. Because after all, I've done it on this bike 6 times, probably the green one over there 3 or 4 times. Sometimes I just come out when I've got nothing better to do and rip the seat off and pull it down and then put it back together just to see how many times you can do it. So I do know you can do this at least, well, I've done it roughly 10 times on both bikes, so I've had plenty of practice doing it, and I think it's at least that way, you know, the person who you're watching has actually done something compared to talking about it. So once again, thanks for tuning in, taking a look. If you'd like to sub, please do, give it a thumbs up, that'd be appreciated too. I'll catch up with you on the next clip.